The first time I met Kira Voss, she was half an hour late to advanced temporal mechanics and eating something that smelled like burnt plastic wrapped in bread. I should probably back up a bit. My name is Threx, and I'm what you humans would call a scholarship student at the Galactic Institute of Higher Learning. 7 feet tall, scales like polished obsidian, 3 fingers on each hand that can crush steel. My species, the Carthene, are known across 40 star systems for our intellectual superiority. We invented quantum bridging. We solved the epsilon paradox. We taught half the galaxy how to think. So naturally, when I found out I'd been assigned a human lab partner for the most difficult course in the entire university, I filed 17 formal complaints. They were all denied. Look, Professor Velcro had said, her mandibles clicking with what I'd learned to recognize as amusement, the human stays. Deal with it, Threx. It'll be good for your ego. Good for my ego. Right. Because watching some primitive ape creature fumble through calculations that Carthene children mastered was exactly what I needed. The lecture hall was massive, carved from a single piece of compressed neutronium, with floating hollow displays that shifted through 11 dimensions. 300 students from 60 different species, all here to study the cutting edge of temporal science. And there I was, sitting in the front row like I always did, my data slate perfectly organized, my notes color-coded by complexity level. That's when she walked in. Or, more accurately, stumbled in. Kira Voss was short, stupidly short, maybe 5.5 feet in your human measurements. Her uniform was wrinkled, one of her boots was untied, and she was carrying what had to be 40 pounds of equipment in a bag that looked like it was held together with actual string. She spotted me immediately. Of course she did. I was the only Carthene in the class, which meant I was impossible to miss. "Hey," she said, far too loudly for a lecture already in progress. "You're Threx, right? I'm Kira. Looks like we're partners." Every eye in the room turned to stare. Professor Velcro stopped mid-sentence, her 3 eyes swiveling to focus on the interruption. I felt my scales flush with embarrassment, which made them glow a faint purple. Wonderful. Just wonderful. "Sit," I hissed, "and be quiet." She dropped into the seat next to me with all the grace of a meteor impact. Her bag hit the floor with a crash that made several students jump. Something inside it was beeping. "Sorry," she whispered, which was somehow louder than her normal speaking voice. "Couldn't find the room. This place is huge. Like, seriously, why does a university need 17 different wings? And don't even get me started on the gravity variations between floors." I almost floated away in Section C. I ignored her and turned my attention back to Professor Velcro, who was discussing the theoretical frameworks for temporal displacement. This was important. This was what I'd come here to learn. The Carthene Empire had spent significant resources to send me to this institution, and I wasn't about to waste it babysitting some human who couldn't even arrive on time. Kira pulled out her own data slate. It was old. Like, embarrassingly old. The kind of technology most species had stopped using 300 years ago. The screen was cracked. There were actual stickers on the back. I felt my secondary stomach turn. "So," she whispered, leaning closer, "what did I miss?" "Everything," I muttered. Cool. Can you catch me up later?" "No." "Awesome. Thanks, partner." I shot her a look that had made lesser beings reconsider their life choices. She just grinned at me, took a bite of her terrible-smelling food, and started scribbling notes that looked more like abstract art than anything related to temporal mechanics. This was going to be a nightmare. The lecture continued for another 2 hours. Professor Velcro covered causality loops, the Brenthax limit, and the fundamental problem of observer paradoxes. It was fascinating stuff, the kind of material that required complete concentration and a deep understanding of multidimensional mathematics. Kira spent most of it drawing little cartoons in the margins of her notes. When class finally ended, I gathered my materials with meticulous care and prepared to leave as quickly as possible. Maybe if I moved fast enough, I could avoid any further interaction with my unfortunate lab partner. "Hey, wait up! No such luck!" Kira caught up to me in the hallway, nearly tripping over her untied boot in the process. Around us, students from a dozen different worlds flowed past, speaking in languages that ranged from melodic chimes to guttural roars. The institute was like a living organism, constantly moving, constantly changing. "So, we should probably figure out our project," she said, matching my pace, which was impressive, given that my stride was nearly twice the length of hers. "Velcra said we need to submit our proposal in 3 weeks. I am aware." "Right. So, ideas?" I stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Maybe if I was clear enough, direct enough, she'd understand the situation. "Listen carefully, human. I do not need a partner. I especially do not need a human partner. Your species has been in the galactic community for less than 50 years. You barely understand quantum mechanics, let alone temporal theory. So, here is what will happen. I will design the project. I will do the calculations. I will write the paper. You will attach your name to it, and try not to embarrass us both. Are we clear?" I expected her to be offended, or intimidated, or maybe even relieved that she wouldn't have to do any actual work. Instead, she laughed. Actually laughed. Right in my face. "Oh man," she said, wiping her eyes. "They warned me. You Carthene types were arrogant, but wow. That's like next-level condescension. Impressive, really." My scales flushed purple again. "I am not being condescending. I am being realistic." Sure. Hey, question. You know why humans got admitted to the Institute? Political pressure. Your government wanted representation. Nope. Try again. I frowned. This wasn't information I'd bothered to research. Why would I? I do not have time for games. "It's because we think different," Kira said, and suddenly her expression wasn't playful anymore. It was sharp, focused. Every other species in the galaxy approaches problems the same way. Logic trees, probability matrices, systematic analysis. Super useful. But sometimes, you need someone who thinks sideways. Someone who looks at the rules and goes, "But what if we just didn't?" That is the most unscientific thing I have ever heard. Yeah, probably. Actually, together. You bring your fancy Carthene logic, and I'll bring my human weirdness. And maybe, just maybe, we'll come up with something nobody's ever thought of before. She stuck out her hand. Humans did that, I'd learned. Some kind of primitive bonding gesture. I looked at her hand, then at her face. She was serious. Completely, genuinely serious. This was stupid. This was going to fail. This was going to destroy my academic reputation before it even started. I reached out and wrapped my 3 fingers around her tiny hand. "Fine," I said, "but if you make me look foolish, I will file a formal complaint with the Interspecies Academic Council." "Deal. Now come on, let's hit the lab. I want to show you something." The Institute's research laboratories were scattered across multiple dimensions, accessible through portals that bent space into uncomfortable angles. Kira led me to Lab 7, which was apparently reserved for temporal studies. The room was a perfect cube, 50 feet, on each side, with walls that shimmered like liquid mercury. "Okay," she said, dumping her bag on one of the workstations. "So I've been messing around with some stuff. Don't freak out." "Why would I freak out?" She pulled something out of her bag. I freaked out. It was a device, roughly cylindrical, maybe 8 inches long, covered in what appeared to be hand-soldered circuits and held together with what was definitely tape. Several wires stuck out at odd angles. A small display screen flickered with numbers that made no mathematical sense. "What?" I said slowly. "Is that?" "This." Kira said proudly, is a temporal resonance detector. I built it last semester. That is not possible. Yeah, I keep hearing that. Anyway, it works. See, the problem with conventional temporal sensors is that they're trying to measure time as a constant. But time isn't constant, right? It's fluid. It shifts. So instead of measuring absolute temporal values, this thing measures the resonance patterns between different temporal states. She flipped a switch. The device hummed to life with a sound like a cat being strangled. It needs some calibration, she admitted. And maybe better shielding. I keep accidentally creating micro-paradoxes in my dorm room. My roommate hates it. She keeps experiencing the same Tuesday over and over. I stared at her. Then at the device. Then back at her. You built a functioning temporal sensor out of spare parts. And determination. Don't forget determination. That should not work. And yet, she waved the device around. The screen flickered, showing a series of waveforms that looked almost, but not quite, like standard temporal signatures. Pretty cool, right? I took the device from her hands, examining it closely. The construction was crude, almost primitive, but the underlying theory was brilliant. She'd approached the problem from an angle that no Carthene would ever consider. Instead of trying to force time into a measurable framework, she'd adapted her measurements to fit time's natural behavior. It was messy. It was inelegant. It was absolutely insane. It was genius. How did you think of this? I asked. Kira shrugged. I don't know. Was thinking about music, actually. You have to feel the rhythm, the flow. Time's kind of like that, you know? It's got a beat. Time does not have a beat. Sure it does. You're just not listening. I set the device down carefully, my mind already racing through possibilities. If this technology could be refined, expanded, coupled with proper Carthene computational systems. All right, I said. I may have underestimated you. May have? I definitely underestimated you. But do not let it inflate your ego. She grinned. Too late. So, partner, what should we work on? I pulled up my data slate, accessing the university's research database. Hundreds of potential projects scrolled past, ranging from basic temporal observation to advanced paradox resolution. But if we were going to do this, if we were actually going to work together, what is the one thing that every species in the galaxy agrees is impossible? I asked. Kira thought for a moment. Then her eyes went wide. Time travel. Like actual, physical time travel. Not just observation or simulation. Exactly. Every species has tried. Every species has failed. The temporal paradoxes alone make it theoretically impossible. Theoretically, Kira repeated. But theories can be wrong. They can, I agreed. And, with your device, combined with Carthene computational power, we might be able to detect stable temporal pathways. Routes through time that avoid paradoxes entirely. That's insane. Completely. Everyone will think we're idiots. Absolutely. I love it. Let's do it. We shook hands again, and this time I felt something I hadn't expected. Excitement. Genuine, scientific excitement. The kind that comes from standing at the edge of the unknown and preparing to jump. This was either going to be the greatest success of my academic career or the most spectacular failure in institute history. Probably both. Over the next 3 weeks, we practically lived in Lab 7. Kira would show up at impossible hours with coffee, which was apparently some kind of human stimulant drug, and start running experiments while I worked on the mathematical models. We fought constantly. She wanted to try things that made no logical sense. I wanted to follow proper scientific protocols. Somehow, we made it work. The device grew. What started as a handheld sensor became a network of resonance detectors, each one calibrated to measure different temporal frequencies. I designed a quantum processor capable of handling the massive computational requirements. Kira jerry-rigged the whole thing together with what I was convinced was literally garbage. Is that a food container? I asked one day, watching her attach something to the main array. Yep, Tupperware is an excellent temporal insulator. Who knew? That cannot possibly be regulation. Good thing we're trying to break every regulation ever written. Professor Velcro visited us twice. The first time, she looked at our work and said nothing, just clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The second time, she brought the department head. They're serious, Velcro said. Completely, genuinely serious. The department head, a massive crystalline being named Mortax, examined our equations. This is either revolutionary or the worst waste of university resources I've ever seen. Could be both, Kira said cheerfully. After they left, I turned to her. Did you just agree that we might be wasting university resources? Sure, but we're not. I can feel it, Threx. We're close to something big. You cannot feel scientific progress? Watch me. She was right, of course. She was infuriatingly, impossibly right. On day 18, at 3 a.m, the device activated. We weren't even trying. Kira had been adjusting one of the resonance coils while I was running calculations, and suddenly, every display in the lab lit up like a supernova. Alarms blared. The air itself seemed to shimmer. What did you do? I shouted over the noise. I don't know, Kira shouted back. But it's beautiful. In the center of the lab, space was folding in on itself. Not violently, not dangerously, but deliberately, carefully. Like reality was origami, and someone knew exactly where to crease it. Numbers scrolled across my data slate too fast to read. Temporal signatures that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, were manifesting right in front of us. We found one, I breathed. A stable temporal pathway. An actual route through time. Can we use it? I do not know. The mathematics are unprecedented. We would need to run 1,000 simulations, conduct extensive safety tests, build proper containment protocols. Kira looked at me, then at the shimmering portal forming in our lab. Or, she said, we could just see where it goes. That would be incredibly dangerous. Yep, scientifically irresponsible. Absolutely. We could die. Or worse, create a paradox that unravels causality. Probably. I looked at the portal. Then, at her. Then, back at the portal. We are definitely going to regret this, I said. Oh, for sure. We stepped forward together. My 3 fingers wrapped around her small hand and jumped into time itself. And that is when things got really weird. The first thing you need to understand about traveling through time is that it feels like being turned inside out while simultaneously existing everywhere and nowhere. The second thing is that it tastes like copper and sounds like your grandmother singing off-key. The third thing is that none of this makes any sense, and you should probably stop trying to make it make sense. We tumbled through what I can only describe as a tunnel made of moments. Past, present, future, all swirling together like paint in water. I saw myself graduating from the Carthene Academy. I saw Kira as a child, building something with blocks. I saw stars being born and dying in the same breath. Then, we hit ground. Actual, solid ground. I lay there for a moment, checking that all my limbs were still attached and functioning. 3 fingers on each hand? Check. Scales intact? Check. Dignity? Questionable. That, Kira said from somewhere to my left, was either the coolest or stupidest thing we've ever done. Both. Definitely both. I stood up, helping Kira to her feet, and looked around. We were still in Lab 7. Same mercury walls, same equipment. But something was different. The light had changed. The displays showed different readings, and through the observation window I could see something that made my blood run cold. The hallway outside was empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of everything. Dust covered the floors, the lights flickered irregularly, the whole place looked abandoned. Threx? Kira's voice was quiet. When are we? I pulled up my data slate. It took a moment to connect to the Institute's network, and when it did, the date stamp made my secondary heart skip a beat. 47 years. We jumped 47 years into the future. Oh no. That's not good. That's really not good. We moved to the door, which opened with a grinding protest. The hallway beyond was a ghost of what we'd known. Equipment lay scattered, half dismantled. Papers drifted in artificial breezes from broken ventilation. And everywhere, there was dust. What happened here? Kira whispered. I do not know. The cafeteria, where I'd eaten lunch 3 weeks ago, was now a hollow shell. The library, where Kira had fallen asleep, studying, was empty of books, empty of life. Finally, in what had been the main administrative office, we found signs of recent activity. A terminal was still running, displaying news feeds from the current date. 47 years after we'd left. Kira accessed the files while I kept watch. What she found made both of us wish we'd never stepped through that portal. Threx, she said slowly. 5 years after we vanished, someone else figured out temporal travel. Used our research, our notes, everything we'd done. That should be good news. It would be, except they screwed it up. Massively. They created a cascade paradox that rippled through 17 star systems. Whole civilizations experienced time loops. Some places aged centuries in days. Others froze completely, stuck in single moments forever. She kept reading, her face growing paler. The Galactic Council banned all temporal research, shut down the Institute, arrested anyone involved in time studies. They called it the Threx catastrophe. We destroyed everything. Our experiment, our work. It led to the biggest disaster in recorded history. Billions affected, thousands dead. And we weren't even here to see it. I felt like my scales were going to fall off. This couldn't be happening. We'd been so careful. We'd found a stable pathway. We'd done everything right. Except we hadn't. Because we'd left our research behind, unguarded, incomplete. Someone had found it and tried to replicate our success without understanding the full implications. We have to go back, I said. We have to stop this from happening. How? We barely controlled the jump forward. Going back? Hitting a specific time? That's exponentially harder. Then we figure it out. That is what we do, is it not? We solve impossible problems. Kira nodded, and I saw something shift in her expression. The playful human who'd stumbled into my life was gone, replaced by someone harder, more focused. Good. We were going to need that. We spent the next 6 hours scavenging the abandoned institute for parts. The temporal device we'd built was still in Lab 7, dusty but intact. Nobody had dared touch it after the catastrophe, treating it like a bomb that might still explode. Smart. While we worked, we talked. Really talked. For the first time since becoming partners. Why did you come to the Institute? I asked, calibrating one of the resonance coils. Same reason as you, probably. Wanted to prove something. Show that humans belonged here, that we weren't just the new kids fumbling around. She laughed bitterly. Guess I proved that, huh? Proved we could screw up just as badly as anyone. This is not your fault, isn't it? I pushed you. I said we should jump through without testing. I was so excited about being right, about proving everyone wrong, that I didn't think about consequences. I stopped working and looked at her. You want to know why Carthene are so obsessed with protocols? With rules and procedures and careful testing? Because you're boring? Because 500 years ago, we created artificial intelligence without proper safeguards. It went rogue. Killed 3 billion of my people before we stopped it. We learned, painfully, that brilliance without caution is just another word for disaster. Kira was quiet for a moment. You never told me that. You never asked. And I never asked why a human would choose temporal mechanics, the hardest field in the galaxy. I assumed you were foolish. I should have assumed you were brave. Can I be both? Most brilliant people are. We got back to work with renewed purpose. The device needed modifications. Going forward through time was like falling, letting temporal currents carry you. Going backward was like climbing upstream against a waterfall. We needed more power, better shielding, and most importantly, precise navigation. That's where Kira's strange, sideways thinking came in handy again. Time isn't a river, she said, drawing diagrams on a dusty wall. It's more like an ocean. Multiple currents, different depths, weird eddies, and loops. We've been thinking about going back as reversing direction, but what if we don't go back at all? That makes no sense. Okay. Look. Every moment exists simultaneously, right? Past, present, future. They're all happening right now in different dimensional spaces. So, instead of traveling backward through time, what if we just move sideways, shift from this dimensional layer to a previous one? I stared at her drawing. It was crude, barely mathematical. But the underlying concept was staggering. That would require calculating positional coordinates across 11 dimensions while accounting for temporal drift and maintaining quantum coherence. So, you're Carthene. You guys eat impossible math for breakfast. We do not eat math. You know what I mean. Can you do it? I pulled up my data slate and started running calculations. The numbers were enormous, probability matrices stretching into billions of variables. But it was possible. Barely. Insanely. Impossibly possible. I can do it, I said. But I will need 17 hours of uninterrupted calculation time, and you will need to rebuild the primary resonance chamber to handle dimensional shifting instead of temporal displacement. I'll need tools. Real tools, not just stuff I find lying around. 3rd floor, engineering wing. The security systems should be offline. On it. She left at a run, and I settled in to do the most complex mathematical work of my life. Numbers flowed across my slate in cascading patterns. Each calculation led to 3 more. Each solution created new problems. My head ached. My scales itched from stress. I consumed enough stimulants to kill a smaller species, but slowly, impossibly, the equation balanced. Kira returned with a hovercart full of equipment, her face smudged with grease and a wild grin on her face. Got everything we need plus some interesting toys. Ready to rebuild this baby? The margin for error is 0.003%. If we are off by even a fraction, we could end up anywhere. Anywhen. So we don't mess up. It is not that simple. Sure it is. Either we try and maybe save billions of people, or we stay here in this dead future and live with knowing we could have fixed it. I know which option I prefer. She was right. She was always right about the important things, even when she was wrong about everything else. We spent the next 12 hours rebuilding the device. My careful calculations translated into real hardware through Kira's somehow functional engineering. She soldered circuits while humming something off-key. I calibrated sensors while calculating backup trajectories. We worked in perfect sync. 2 completely different minds, creating something neither could have built alone. Finally, as the empty Institute's chronometers showed hour 36 of our work session, we were done. The device looked nothing like it had before. Sleeker, more compact, absolutely covered in Kira's improvised improvements and my precise modifications. It hummed with barely contained power, ready to tear a hole between dimensional layers. 1 shot, I said. We get 1 attempt. If this fails, we will not have power for a second try. Then, we better not fail. You ready? No. Are you? Not even a little bit. We activated the device together, my 3 fingers and her 5, working the controls in practiced harmony. The lab filled with light, reality bending around us like heated glass. I could see through the shimmer to another time, another version of this room where two younger versions of ourselves were about to make a terrible mistake. Coordinates locked, I reported. Power at maximum. We have 30 seconds before cascade. Failure. Then let's not waste them. 3, 2, 1. We jumped. This time, the sensation was different. Instead of being pulled through time, we slid between moments like cards being shuffled. I saw infinite versions of the Institute, infinite possibilities, all existing simultaneously. In one, we'd never met. In another, we'd failed our first exam. In a third, we'd succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. Then, we were standing in Lab 7, 3 weeks in our past, watching two younger versions of ourselves about to step through the first portal. "Wait!" Kira shouted. Our younger selves turned, startled. Young Threx looked confused and alarmed. Young Kira looked delighted. "Oh wow," young Kira said. "Are you us? Are we you? This is so cool." "Listen carefully," I said, stepping forward. "Do not go through that portal. Not yet. You need to implement safety protocols first." Young Threx's scales flushed purple. "And why should we listen to you? This is a stable temporal pathway. We calculated everything." "Your calculations are correct," future Kira said, "but incomplete. Someone will steal your research, use it improperly, create a disaster that affects billions. We've seen it. We've lived through the aftermath. That is ridiculous," young me said. But I could see doubt in his eyes. The equations were on his slate. He knew, deep down, that we'd rushed things. "Look," I said, addressing my younger self directly, "I know you want to prove yourself. I know you think you have something to prove to everyone. But brilliance without caution is just disaster waiting to happen." That sounds like something Professor Velcro would say. She's right. We all rushed. We were excited and scared and desperate to prove everyone wrong. But science isn't about proving people wrong. It's about finding truth, no matter how long it takes. Young Kira looked between us, her quick mind clearly working through the implications. What if we publish our safety protocols first, release them to the entire galaxy before anyone tries to replicate our work? "That would help," future Kira said. "But you also need to slow down. Test everything. Run simulations. Maybe succeed in 6 months instead of 6 weeks. But we'll lose our priority status. Better than losing billions of lives." Young Threx and young Kira looked at each other. I remembered this moment from the other side. Remembered the frustration and excitement and fear all mixed together. Would they listen? Would we have listened? Finally, young Threx nodded. "Very well. We will implement proper protocols, publish our safety findings, take the time to do this correctly. And we'll still succeed," young Kira added. "Just smarter this time." "Exactly," I said. "And one more thing. Trust each other. You are going to fight constantly. You are going to drive each other absolutely insane. But you are better together than either of you could ever be apart." The portal behind us began to flicker. Our power was running out. "We have to go," future Kira said. "Good luck. To both of you." "Wait," young me called out. "Where will you go? You are from a timeline that no longer exists." I looked at Kira. She looked at me. We hadn't thought about that part. "I guess we figure it out," she said. "That's kind of our thing, right? Figuring out impossible problems." We stepped back through the portal as it collapsed, sliding sideways through dimensional layers one more time. But this time, we had no destination. We were refugees from a future that would never happen, looking for a place to exist. The universe, it turned out, had a sense of humor about such things. We materialized in a small apartment on Earth, current date exactly 47 years after we'd originally left. But this version of Earth was different. Brighter. The news feeds showed the Galactic Institute still thriving, temporal research advancing carefully and safely, new discoveries announced every day. On my data slate, a message appeared from the Institute, from Professor Velcro, of all beings. Threx and Kira. Temporal signatures indicate you've been displaced from an alternate timeline. The Institute's Temporal Research Department has created a position for both of you. Consultant advisors on safe temporal experimentation. The pay is terrible, but the research opportunities are unlimited. Report when ready. Try not to break reality again. Kira burst out laughing. Real, genuine laughter that made her whole body shake. She's sarcastic, even across dimensions. I said carefully. We successfully prevented a catastrophe by creating a paradox where we never existed but also definitely existed. Yep. And now, we get to do it all again. But better this time. With actual safety protocols and everything. This is insane. Completely. I should have filed those complaints. Probably. But then, you would have missed all this fun. I looked around the small apartment, at Earth spinning below. At a universe full of possibilities, we'd somehow managed to save, and doom, and save again, all at once. You know what the worst part is? I said. What? I actually enjoy working with you. Despite everything. Despite the chaos, and the near-death experiences, and the complete lack of proper procedure. You make me better at what I do. Kira smiled. That same wild grin she'd worn when she first stumbled into my life. Absolutely not. Perfect. Let's go do it anyway. We gathered our things, what few possessions we had from a future that no longer existed, and headed out into this new reality we'd accidentally created. Somewhere out there, younger versions of ourselves were building something beautiful and careful and safe, and we would be there to guide them. Two impossible people from an impossible timeline, proving once again that sometimes the best solutions come from the strangest partnerships. Behind us, the apartment's view screen flickered to life, showing news from the Institute. A press conference. Young Threx and young Kira, standing together, announcing their breakthrough in safe temporal research. The reporter asked how they'd known to implement such careful protocols from the start. Young Kira just smiled mysteriously. Let's just say we had help from some experienced consultants. Very experienced. The universe kept spinning. Time kept flowing. And somewhere in Lab 7, a Carthene and a human were probably arguing about the proper way to calibrate a resonance detector while simultaneously saving the galaxy, one impossible experiment at a time. Some things, I'd learned, were constant across all timelines, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.